This video is going to help you complete your favorite number project. In this assignment, you're going to review a lot of the major topics we've covered throughout 6th grade, so it's helpful to see this as a review. First thing is to make sure you've chosen a number that is greater than 10. It can be anything you want as long as it's bigger than 10. You're going to use the same number throughout this entire project. And for bonus points, you can add pictures or edit the design. The first thing you're going to tell me is if your number is prime or composite. I'll do this example using the number 6, since that's a number we won't be using. 6 is a composite number because it has more than 2 factors. Because to get 6, I could do 1 times 6, or I could do 2 times 3. Prime numbers, the only way that you can achieve a prime number is by taking 1 and multiplying it by itself. On the next slide, you're going to list out all of the factors of your number. So for 6, I typically use a factor t to do this, starting with 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. When you're using a bigger number, remember you want to check all of those possibilities. You can do so using a calculator. Okay, so for example, let's say your number was 23, and you were trying to decide if 4 is a factor of 23. You could take 23 divided by 4, and because it's giving us a decimal, it is not a factor. And remember to make sure that you check all possibilities when listing your factors until you get to this flip-flop where in the middle of your factors you can see I go from 2, 3 to 3, 2. Prime factorization is when we take a number and break it down into all of its prime factors. We use a factor tree. So I start with my number 6, and to get 6 I can take 2 times 3. Both of these are prime, so I would circle them. And so the prime factorization is just those 2 prime numbers multiplied by each other. If you end up with a prime number and that's what you choose, the prime factorization of any prime number is just that number. For slide 5, you're asked to write a word problem so that your number is the solution. So you can use any topic you want. It could be adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, as long as the answer to the problem is your original number. So for example, I could say I run 2 miles each day. How far do I go in 3 days? Now to get my answer for this problem, I would take the amount of days that I'm running, so 3 days, multiply it by the number of days I'm going. Again, the solution to this problem is 6, which is the number my project is based on. For slide 6, you're going to write a decimal problem. So take your number, you can add, subtract, multiply, or divide it by anything that has a decimal, and then come up with your answer. Okay, so the problem I'll show you is if I take my number 6 plus the decimal 2 3/10. Make sure you show your work for full credit. When we add and subtract decimals, we want to make sure our decimal point is lined up. So here and here. And the solution is 8.3. So your answer does not have to be this number. You're just going to calculate what your number is with some form of decimal. For slide 7, you are writing your number as the coefficient with any variable. Remember, variables are letters or symbols. So for this one, my number is 6, and if I write that as a coefficient, I can pick any variable I want. So for here, 6m shows 6 is the coefficient of the variable m. Okay, for slide 8, you're finding the GCF, or greatest common factor. Remember, that's when we make our factor t's, which you should have already done for your number. So for 6, it's 2 and 3. In my example, I did this with 20 because I didn't want to give you all the factors of 200. So I list out all factors. And greatest common factor means I'll circle the ones they have in common. So 1 is in both lists, 2 is in both lists. Because nothing else is in common, the biggest one that I circled is 2, so that is our GCF. For LCM, that stands for least common multiple. You're going to take your number, list out some of the first few multiples. So 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3. Do the same thing for 4 until you find the first number they share in common, which for 6 and 4 happens to be 12. Right, for slide 10, you're finding the quotient of your number with this mixed number. Quotient is division, so you'll take your number, divide it by 3 3/4. The first thing we need to do is convert 3 3/4 into a mixed number. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. 6 becomes a fraction by putting it over 1. And then the algorithm we use to divide fractions is keep the first one the same, change to multiplication, and flip. Once this turns into a multiplication problem, you can multiply across numerators and across denominators. And then the last thing is to then convert this back into a mixed number by dividing. 15 goes into 24 one time with 9 left over. So I have 1 whole and 9 15ths. Slide 11 is finding the product of your number and 8.6. Product means to multiply. Make sure you're showing your work. So I want to see the multiplication step out like this. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 8 is 48, plus 3 is 51. Because I have 1 decimal point originally, I have 1 decimal point in my answer. On slide 12, I want you to come up with an inequality that has my number as a solution. Okay, to be a solution, that means that if I were to plug this number in to my inequality for the variable, that it is true. So I have x, let's say I want it to be greater than, so my number is 6, so I want to put anything that is, we'll make this true. So 6 is greater than, let's say, 3. So you can use either symbol, less than or greater than, and you just want to make sure that if you replace the variable with your number that that's true. Again, if I take 6 and I say 6 is greater than 3, that's true. For the graphing, we go to what you've come up with as your inequality. 3 is in the middle, 4 and 2. I have an unshaded circle at 3 because it can't equal 3, and then greater than would be shaded in this direction. For slide 13, you're finding the mean, which is the average. To find the mean, take all of these numbers, add them up, include your number, so for me I would have 6, and then you'll divide by how many numbers there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For this one, you can have your solution come from a calculator as long as I can see how this is set up, and you'll have a decimal as your answer. Right, almost to the end here. One of the last slides here is asking you to find the area of a triangle using this formula, base times height divided by 2. The height is 12. Your number is going to be the base. Again, plug your number in and come up with your solution. 6 times 12 is 72. Divided by 2 is 36. Right, your last slide asks you to substitute your number into this expression. So what I'll do is I'm going to replace x with my number 6. Remember 15, the coefficient of x, or in this case 6, is going to multiply. So this is really 15 times 6, which is 90. Then we add our 12, get 112. Great. Use your number to answer all of these slides just like this. Please make sure you're showing your work to get full credit.